Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Natalie Warren, who's here to share with us her book, Hudson Bay Bound. 2 women, 1 dog, 2,000 miles to the Arctic. Have you ever dreamed of embarking on an adventure that pushes the limits of both body and mind? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. So Natalie Warren is an author, scholar, and public speaker on environmental issues. A lifelong paddler and river lover, she canoed the length of the Mississippi and won first place in the Yukon River Quest in the Women's Voyager Division, paddling 450 miles in 53 hours. So welcome to the show, Natalie Warren.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. I've got to tell you, once I picked up your book and started reading it, I could not put it down. I just loved it. What even inspired you to undertake such a challenging expedition?
Well, there is a book called Canoeing with the Cree that Eric Severide, an old CBS reporter from back in the day, he did this route with his friend Walter Port in 1930. And he wrote the book Canoeing with the Cree, which came out in 1935. And it's just been this sort of iconic adventure story, especially in the Midwest where the trip takes place. And my friend Anne and I had been to wilderness expedition camps and had learned how to pack out for trips and to paddle whitewater rivers. And it was our very last semester of college. And Anne kind of threw the book at me and said, "Read this. I think we should do it." And I read all about their journey paddling from the Twin Cities, up the Minnesota River, down the Red River, across the border into Canada, up Lake Winnipeg, and then out on Arctic rivers to Hudson Bay. And I told Anne the next day, I said, "Okay, let's do it." And so 2 days after we graduated from college, we left on this expedition.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so brave. And how was it? I mean, I think you'd have to prepare like mentally and physically for this journey.
Yeah, well, the physical part, we were 21 and 22, and bodies are very forgiving at that age. We were in pretty good shape, and we did a little bit of training, but the trip, and often this is true with expeditions, is that it's kind of it prepares the expedition itself prepares you for the expedition. And so we were able to build our muscles day after day paddling upstream during a flood. And then by the time we got to Lake Winnipeg, we were just so buff and ready to fight those big waves. And then mentally, I think it was actually really important for me to not think too much about this trip, because there are 1,000 reasons not to do it. And the more you think about it, the easier it is, I think, to talk yourself out of it. And, we did all of our research and we were prepared and we tried to learn as much as possible about the places we were going through. But you can't really plan too much for a trip like this because it just unfolds and you have to adapt to whatever you encounter as you're moving with the river. So I can't say. I tried to keep myself from worrying too much about the mental side of things.
I could see how that's not really a trip one can ever really fully prepare for.
You can't. And I mean, I've done a lot of trips. I've paddled over 7,000 miles in a canoe. And every time I plan, even, for the next 6 hours, it never works out the way you think it's going to work out, whether it's weather or an opportunity that emerges that you didn't expect. On our trip to Hudson Bay, Anne and I had done wilderness expeditions. And so we packed out food, like pounds per person per day. But for the first time, we were paddling through rural and urban areas. And we would plan all of our meals. But then people would run to the riverbank and bring us cupcakes and invite us over for dinner. And so you kind of just want to roll with those things, and actually saying yes to those opportunities and getting to know the people along the rivers really helped us better learn about and understand beyond just the paddling the river, but hearing the stories of the people who actually live there really elevated this trip above other ones for me.
I could see where there's probably this real big sense of community as you guys are doing this, just being so involved and having people involved in your journey too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I think on our wilderness expeditions, we would see these really beautiful scenic places. You would sing a song or write a poem, and maybe there would be a storm and you would have to weather different natural things like that. But on this trip, we were paddling through the Corn Belt of America. We were paddling over cornfields during a flood, and it kind of forced us to look at human impact on the landscape, whether that was from agriculture or industry or staying with First Nation communities and hearing stories of their injustices. It was a trip that made us think. And it was a trip that the things that we experienced and encountered, I could not forget. And they've impacted me beyond just kind of going on a fun adventure in nature. Um, there are things that I've really dedicated my entire career to continuing to learn and think about that were sparked on that expedition.
I could see how something like this would really impact a person's soul that would carry with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous thing is that we had a dream and we made it happen. And when you get a taste of that, you kind of start to feel like you can do big things. And that is a really beautiful and dangerous thing. It's I think a sense of restlessness in me, maybe that's putting it in a negative light, but this sort of like, well, I did that, what else can I do? And that can translate to a lot of different areas of life, not just going on a large cool adventure, but how can I be the mom I want to be, or I'm starting my next book. And, like it's actually believing in myself from that trip, seeing how we planned for it and executed it and accomplished our goal was really empowering, over the last decade of my life, really taking that with me.
What are some of the most unexpected challenges you faced along your route?
So this route is sort of four trips in one. It was upstream on a flooded river. It was very hot on the Minnesota River. We were downstream on the Red River. And then we were on a massive lake. Lake Winnipeg is the 11th largest lake in the world in terms of surface area. And then we were paddling an Arctic whitewater river in very remote areas. Some of the biggest challenges on this expedition were, you have the heat and the weather, whether it's a hailstorm or a tornado watch, which we had really checklist all of the above weather situations on this journey. Wildlife encounters, always a little bit concerned about our safety, especially in more urban areas, and the physical challenges. But I think one of the hardest parts was that I went on this trip with one other person, my best friend, Anne, and we're not accustomed to living so intimately and collaboratively with another person who is a friend. And we were together for 100 days straight, and we had to make every decision together. We never left each other's side. And we were in a canoe, and we literally had to agree on where we were going in our boat. And that we got along really well, considering, but one of the biggest challenges was figuring out how to communicate tensions, how to work through some of the problems we were having. I was really relaxed about our safety, sort of in a reactionary, response to Anne being a little bit more anxious about things. And so I thought if I were more relaxed, that would sort of balance us out. But that got out of balance, and we got into this huge fight on Lake Winnipeg. The lake was completely flat, and we were paddling at night to paddle when the wind wasn't the strongest. And the stars were out, the Milky Way was out. I was in the stern, the back of the canoe. So I got to direct which way we were going. And in my mind, I thought, it's a still night. Let's make some distance. I'm going to cut across this big bay. And Anne was uncomfortable with how far from shore I was getting. And we just started sort of yelling at each other. It sort of sparked this really, really big argument for us. we were fighting about things that had happened back in college, all the way up through our expedition and kind of pulling the weeds of our relationship. We reached a point where we just weren't talking to each other anymore. And unbeknownst to us, the Northern Lights had started to come out while we were yelling at each other in the middle of the night, floating on this massive lake all alone. And we were just staring at what was perhaps the most beautiful scene I've ever experienced unfold before us. And I remember thinking, I want so badly to tell Anne, I'm glad she's here with me, but I wasn't talking to her. And the only thing we said that night was, I said, I thought I was overcompensating now. And I said, Anne, can you shine your light toward shore and see how far away we are? And she does. And there are two huge green eyes of a bull moose staring at us, not 100 yards away. And she just says, yep, we're too close to shore. But then after that, we actually wrote each other letters. We were together all the time. We wrote each other letters while we were in the same tent that expressed a little bit more of how we were feeling about our trip and our relationship, how we view ourselves as sisters, and starting to understand at it, relatively young age. I wish I had learned this earlier, that fighting with your friends or having conflict and working through conflict actually makes a relationship a lot stronger. But the first month and a half or so of that expedition, when we hadn't talked about our grievances, was one of the biggest challenges on that trip. But it just got better and better when we actually did talk about it.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like an adventure where, especially when two people are kind of in the same space, that, if anything's coming out, it's all coming out,
Yes. And yeah, and, we had some rough moments, but we're still best friends. And I think having that foundation of working through those feelings together laid this just lifelong friendship and love and understanding of each other and our flaws.
Well, it sounds like you guys came up with such a great creative way to be able to handle that worked for you both. And I really applaud you for doing that. What an inspiration that is, being able to work through it instead of, trying to throw somebody out of the boat, So-
Yes. Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of people who go on expeditions and do not talk to their expedition partner after that trip. The make or break.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Natalie Warren in regards to her new book, Hudson Bay Bound: 2 Women, 1 Dog, 2,000 Miles to the Arctic. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Natalie Warren in regards to her new book, Hudson Bay Bound, 2 Women, 1 Dog, 2,000 Miles to the Arctic. So there was a dog with you guys. So whose dog? And I can't even imagine. So you've got to carry provisions for 2 people plus a dog.
Yeah, so we didn't start our trip with a dog. And we had no idea we were going to get a dog. But when we finished paddling Lake Winnipeg, we stayed with a Cree First Nation community at Norway House and on the Nelson River before we got onto the Hayes River. And we stayed with the Mushwagan family. We got there just in time for York Boat Festival Days, which is this big celebration where everyone in the town is out and they're racing York boats, and there were stray dogs running around everywhere. And apparently they don't have a humane society. And in the winter, the dogs pack up and attack people. And so we were staying up late one night with Mike and Janice Mushwagan. And Mike kind of was jesting a little bit. And he's like, ladies, you're going into polar bear country. Why don't you take a dog? And if a polar bear comes, it'll eat your dog and you'll have time to load your gun. And Anne and I just sort of laughed. But then the next day we were walking around as if we were window shopping for a dog that could fit in our canoe. And then at the end of that day, we drove around with Mike and Janice's daughter, Crystal, at night, and we saw the silhouette of a dog licking ketchup packets off the ground outside of the movie theater. And we knew she was the one. We ran out, we grabbed her, we put her in the car, and we named her Maihan. Mahihan in Cree means wolf. And we like to think that she was part wolf. And we put her in the canoe the next morning, and turns out she's afraid of water, which really was helpful. If you've ever canoed with a dog who loves water, it's nearly impossible. But Maihan would just sleep in the boat all day, and she would run around and hunt at night. And she was this really wonderful addition to our expedition, in no way live bait to us at all. She was, our third expedition mate. And we did have to, that was the most portage heavy. So portage is generally a path that connects 2 bodies of water. And so we have to carry all of our gear across these not well-maintained paths to get from, a river to across around a waterfall or something like that. And so for our most portage heavy part of the trip, we were now lugging around this huge bag of dog food on top of our, 50, 60 pound packs and all of our gear and canoes and things like that. But it was absolutely worth it to have Maihan along for the end of our journey.
What a great story. And she becomes part of the adventure as well. Oh my goodness. What would you say was one of the scariest encounters you had with wildlife while you were on this trip?
Well, we did get to see a polar bear in the wilds, but it was the best case scenario where we arrived at York Factory, our destination. York Factory used to be a community of over 300 people. It's on the shores of Hudson Bay. It's where the Hudson Bay Company would build their large York boats to do trading all around North America. And Anne and I pulled up. We didn't eat much that day because we wanted to get there so badly that we didn't want to waste time eating food, because that's time we could spend paddling and getting closer to our destination. That's how bad we wanted to get there. And so we finally arrive after 85 days on the water, and we pull up and we start making the rest of our food. It's like dehydrated hash browns and beans and the most delicious meal we've ever had. And the caretakers there, so now York Factory is just a historic site. You can only get there by boat or by float plane. And there were 3 caretakers there when we were there, and a lot of climatologists come and measure the melting permafrost. This is an area greatly impacted by climate change. And so it's kind of got this ghost town feel to it. We were sitting in this field making the rest of our food, and a polar bear comes around the corner. And this is something that we've been avoiding, really trying not to encounter a polar bear for 2 weeks. And here, all of a sudden, is this polar bear meandering our way. And so we look up at the caretaker and we're like, we're ready to go inside now. And we had the rare privilege of being able to go inside the caretaker's home and watch the polar bear just kind of meander along the shores throughout the day. So that could have been scary, but it actually wasn't scary. It was really beautiful. To answer your question, the scariest wildlife encounter we had was on Lake Winnipeg. We were in this really big lightning storm, really strong winds, middle of the night. We had finally set up our tent and we were, dry and falling asleep, and 2 huge bear claws pushed down at the top of our tent. And so I jumped to the other side and I wake Anne up and I let her know that there's a bear outside. But really it was a black bear. So we just ran out of our tent and made loud sounds and looked really big. I think the scariness of the whole situation was exacerbated by the fact that it was a huge lightning storm in the middle of the night with a bear encounter layered on top of that. And not an hour later, the corner of our tent started to kind of fly up in the wind. And so we had to disassemble all of our gear and follow that bear into the dark woods where we had chased it away and sort of sit on our life jackets in lightning position for a while. So that was our most intense wildlife encounter. But really, I think on a trip like this, encounters with people are actually a lot scarier than encounters with wildlife.
Oh, I can only imagine. So how would you say that this journey has really impacted or changed your perspective on the wilderness and the environment?
When I did this trip, I was fresh out of my undergraduate degree in environmental studies and policy, and I had just spent 4 years thinking and talking and writing about environmental issues, especially as they pertain to something like agricultural policy. And when I launched on this trip, I realized I knew everything in theory, but I didn't know much at all. I was launched into the real world to have very candid conversations with people. We would sit across the table from farmers who would invite us into their homes. And we would say, why do you grow corn and soybeans all the way to the river? Like, the chemicals that you're using on your field are going right into the water, and that flows into the Mississippi, and that impacts the dead zone and the Gulf of Mexico. And, can't we put some vegetation there to help this problem? And they would just tell us how it is. They're like, well, we get paid based on yield and we need to grow as much as possible because we're in debt. And you just start to understand the complexities of a lot of these issues when you hear the stories that people have and have a better understanding of their lifestyles, which was really, really impactful for me. Environmentally, I learned more about environmental and social issues paddling a canoe than I had reading and writing about environmental issues. There's something about that slow, embodied, repetitive movement. We spent the entire day just observing everything around us, and you start to see patterns. You see where native plants are planted, there is less erosion. Where it's just, turf grass or agriculture without vegetation, the banks are slowly eroding. You start to put the pieces together yourself just based on what you are seeing and experiencing. I also felt a deep sadness for a lot of the things that we saw. The water quality on the Minnesota River and the Red River, and even in Lake Winnipeg, is really bad. We couldn't even filter water to drink for the majority of our expedition. And so we could see how what we do on land greatly impacts the water and the water quality, how all of these systems are connected. We paddled 2,000 miles. Our longest portage was a mile long. All of these waters are connected. Yet when we got to the Hayes River, mostly just forests surrounding these Arctic rivers, the water quality was so clean that we could drink directly from the river, which was a stark difference from what we had experienced at the beginning of our trip. So really, we traversed almost this trope of beginning of before and after, where you see what the water quality could be like, And then you see what we've done to the land and what the water quality is as a result of that. And that's really stuck with me, is understanding the interconnectedness and the fragility of a lot of these systems.
Well, I think that's so just important for us to hear and also to keep just aware of. I think people aren't aware enough of how our environment's doing, and maybe there's some things we can do to make some changes, even though, like you're saying, there are different elements to it that we have to really be aware of.
Yeah, and actually being in the places and building a relationship with the places that we're trying to protect and restore is a big takeaway I had from all of my canoe trips, because we can learn about environmental issues and we can work towards better science and better policy. But Robin Wall Kimmerer, author of Braiding Sweetgrass, said, good science and policy are necessary, but so is our own relationship to the places we are trying to protect. We have to learn how to love the places, and it's hard to fall in love with somewhere that you're not experiencing or interacting with on, more than once. And, canoeing, the length that we canoed in the place that we canoed made us fall in love with that landscape. And as a result, made us want to care for it.
What advice would you give others, and especially women, considering undertaking this type of an expedition?
It is absolutely possible. And I think especially for women, you have to really not listen to what people are telling you. If this is something, if you have a trip that you know in your heart that you want to do, there's going to be a lot of people talking you out of it in subtle and not so subtle ways. I think, the narrative for women is still very much sort of that caregiving. You need to be home. You need to be taking care of whether it's your kids or your family, or staying on track with your career to prove that you can be a professional. I don't know. There's just so many narratives for women that can talk them out of doing something that's a little bit out of the box that I don't think men necessarily have the same, or at least the intensity of that type of communication for. But I think if you know that you have a purpose, if you know that you want to do something, that even if people don't understand why you are doing it, even if they question you or try to redirect you, you really have to kind of stick true to what you believe and understand that nobody's going to fully understand what your drive is for something like this. And that's okay. They don't need to. You just have to do it for yourself. And I've learned that in every facet of my life now. There's always going to be someone trying to talk you out of something, because we have a different social understanding of what people's roles should be and what they should be doing with their lives in different phases. And then also, for a long trip, you're going to experience sexism along the route, in the planning process, in the aftermath. We had a guy on our trip that we met on Lake Winnipeg, and we told him where we were going. And he said, he kind of laughed at us. He was like, "You're not going to make it to Hudson Bay. And if you do, you won't make it there until October." And when we got there in August, he was the first person that we called from this payphone in Gillam, Manitoba. And he didn't even remember who we were. And he just kind of became this fuel for us to keep going. There were a lot of people who expressed doubt, and they put a fire in us to actually prove that we could do it. But it really was insult on top of injury there when he didn't even remember us. And we probably thought about him every day after that.
Well, it's just amazing how comments like that really impact us on our journey, but also as women. I mean, we take so much of that in. So I applaud you too, and of course, my hand for doing the trip that you guys did and coming out the other side. I mean, what a just fantastic read Hudson Bay Bound is. Where can our readers and our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work and be part of your community?
Absolutely. So my website, natalie-warren.com, has all of our trip blog. It has information about the book. It has different videos that are also up on YouTube if you want to kind of see the sights and pictures along with the book. And I also have a newsletter. So I'm working on a book now about my expedition down the Mississippi River, which I did 2 years after my Hudson Bay expedition. And I'll send updates and things like that. And I do a lot of public speaking and book talks and book signings. So people can sign up to get updates on that through my website.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Natalie. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Hudson Bay Bound, 2 Women, 1 Dog, 2,000 Miles to the Arctic. Make sure to visit Natalie's website at natalie-warren.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.